I laughed. God help me, I laughed. It was the kind of laugh that bubbles up from somewhere deep in your chest before you can stop it. Genuine, surprised, completely inappropriate for a woman who was supposed to be invisible. The sound echoed through the marble-floored ballroom like a gunshot. And just as deadly, 47 pairs of eyes turned to stare at me. I felt every single one like a physical touch, cold and assessing. But it was the 48th pair that made my blood turn to ice. Eyes the color of midnight, belonging to the man whose joke I just laughed at. The man everyone else had met with stone-faced silence. Dante Moretti, the ghost of Chicago, a man whose name was whispered in the same breath as curses and prayers. And I, Isabella Hayes, a 26-year-old event coordinator who was only supposed to make sure the champagne kept flowing and the canapes stayed warm, had just committed the cardinal sin of drawing his attention. The ballroom held its breath. So did I. And in that suspended moment, watching his expression shift from surprise to something I couldn't quite name, I realized that my laugh had just changed everything. Because in Dante Moretti's world, there were only two kinds of people: those who feared him and those who didn't survive long enough to learn they should have. I had just shown him I was neither. 6 hours earlier, my biggest concern had been whether we'd ordered enough oysters for the Moretti Foundation gala. Bella, table 17 needs more champagne. Sophia, my assistant, whispered urgently as she rushed past carrying a tray of lobster medallions. And Senator Whitmore's wife is asking about the dessert timeline. I glanced at my tablet, mentally calculating the timing. The Moretti Foundation Gala was the event of the season. 300 of Chicago's elite crammed into the grand ballroom of the Belmont Hotel, each paying $10,000 a plate for the privilege of rubbing shoulders with old money, new money, and the kind of money that didn't have a legitimate source, but no one dared question. That last category, that was the Moretti family's specialty. Tell her 45 minutes, I replied, scanning the room with practiced efficiency. And have Marco bring up 3 more cases of the Bollinger. The Carmichael table is going through it like water. Sophia nodded and disappeared into the controlled chaos that only looked effortless because I'd planned every second of it down to the last detail. 4 years of building my event planning business from nothing, and this gala was my masterpiece. Land this account permanently, and I could finally afford to hire a full staff instead of cobbling together freelancers for every event. Miss Hayes. A deep voice at my elbow made me turn. The man was massive, built like a linebacker in an expensive suit that couldn't quite conceal the bulge of a shoulder holster. His face was scarred, a thin white line running from his left eyebrow to his jaw, but his eyes held a professional courtesy that immediately pegged him as security, not a guest. Yes? Mr. Moretti would like to see you. Privately. My stomach dropped. Dante Moretti hadn't exchanged more than 3 words with me during the entire planning process. All communication had gone through his assistant, a severe woman named Katerina who treated every email like a binding legal contract. For him to request a private meeting now, in the middle of the event, "Of course," I said, maintaining my professional smile even as my mind raced through everything that could have gone wrong. "Lead the way." He guided me through the ballroom, past tables draped in cream silk and centerpieces of white roses that had cost more than my monthly rent. The guests were in high spirits, the champagne flowing freely, the string quartet playing Vivaldi with perfect precision. Everything was going according to plan. So why did I feel like I was walking toward an execution? We exited through a side door, down a corridor lined with oil paintings of stern-faced men in military uniforms. The security guard stopped before a set of double doors, knocked twice, and waited. "Enter." Even through the heavy wood, Dante Moretti's voice carried absolute authority. The guard opened the door, gestured me inside, and closed it behind me with an ominous click. The room was a private study, all dark wood and leather furniture. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined one wall, filled with leather-bound volumes that looked actually read rather than decoratively arranged. A massive desk dominated the space, and behind it stood Dante Moretti. I'd seen him before, of course. Photographs in the society pages, carefully staged shots at charity events where he played the role of philanthropist so convincingly you could almost forget the rumors. But photographs didn't capture the sheer presence of the man. He was tall, easily 6'3", with the kind of build that suggested discipline rather than vanity. His tuxedo was impeccably tailored, molded to shoulders that could carry the weight of an empire. Dark hair silvered at the temples, swept back from a face that was all sharp angles and controlled power. He couldn't have been more than 40, but his eyes held the kind of experience that came from seeing too much, too young. "Miss Hayes." He didn't smile, didn't offer his hand, just watched me with those unsettling dark eyes that seemed to catalog every micro-expression that crossed my face. "Your reputation precedes you. I hope the evening is meeting your expectations, Mr. Moretti." "It's exceeding them." He moved around the desk, each step deliberate and measured, which is why I wanted to speak with you personally. "I have a proposition." My heart hammered against my ribs, but I kept my expression neutral. In my line of work, I'd dealt with demanding clients before, wealthy men who thought their money entitled them to more than just event planning services. I'd become an expert at deflecting unwanted advances while maintaining professional relationships. But something told me Dante Moretti didn't make propositions that could be easily declined. "I'm listening." "My daughter is turning 18 next month. I want you to plan her birthday party." He retrieved a crystal tumbler from his desk, poured 2 fingers of amber liquid that smelled like it cost more than my car. He didn't offer me one. "It will be at my estate, approximately 200 guests. I'll need your complete discretion and your undivided attention for the next 4 weeks. A high-profile gig with unlimited budget and the kind of networking that could set me up for years. It should have been a dream opportunity. So why did it feel like a trap?" "I'd be honored, Mr. Moretti, if you'll have Katerina send over the details." "No." He took a slow sip of his drink, never breaking eye contact. "You'll coordinate directly with me. My daughter's safety is paramount, which means I need to personally vet every vendor, every guest, every detail. That level of involvement requires trust, Miss Hayes, and trust is something I rarely extend." The implication hung in the air between us. He was offering me access to his inner circle, to his home, to his daughter. In his world, that wasn't just a business transaction. It was a test. "I understand," I said carefully. "I can provide references, background checks, whatever you need to feel comfortable. I've already conducted my due diligence." The corner of his mouth lifted in something that wasn't quite a smile. "I know about your mother's medical bills, your father's gambling debts that you've been paying down for 3 years, your apartment in Logan Square with the broken security system your landlord refuses to fix, the scholarship you lost when you had to leave Northwestern to take care of your family." My blood ran cold. The fact that he knew these things, had investigated me so thoroughly, should have terrified me. It did terrify me. But beneath the fear was something else. Anger. "Those are private matters." "Nothing is private, Miss Hayes. Not from me." He set down his glass with deliberate care. "I'm not telling you this to frighten you, though I suspect I have. I'm telling you so you understand the kind of man you'd be working for. I know everything about everyone in my orbit. It's how I've survived in a world where trust is a luxury and secrets are currency. Then you also know I'm good at my job." Something flickered in those dark eyes. Approval, maybe, or amusement at my audacity for meeting his intensity with defiance instead of submission. "I do, which is why you're here. Most people would have walked out the moment I mentioned investigating them. But you're still standing there, calculating whether the opportunity is worth the invasion of privacy." He moved closer, close enough that I could smell cedar and something darker, more dangerous. "So tell me, Isabella Hayes, is it worth it?" I should have said no. Should have walked out with whatever dignity I had left and gone back to scraping by with small corporate events and wedding receptions. But my mother needed another surgery. The debt collectors called 3 times a week, and some treacherous part of me was intrigued by the challenge of working with a man who was simultaneously Chicago's most generous philanthropist and its most feared criminal. "Yes," I heard myself say, "it's worth it." His smile was sharp enough to cut. "Good. Then let's return to your excellent party. We can discuss the details of my daughter's celebration tomorrow. 9 a.m., my office." "I'll be there." "I know you will." He opened the door, gesturing for me to precede him. "Oh, and Miss Hayes, the amount I'm prepared to pay for this event would clear your mother's medical debt. Completely. Consider it a signing bonus." I stopped, turned to look at him, searched his face for manipulation, for the trap I knew had to be hiding in such generosity. "Why?" because I reward loyalty, and I sense you'll be very loyal once properly motivated." He studied me for a long moment. "Besides, it's not generosity. It's an investment in you and in the relationship we're about to build. One that will be mutually beneficial if you remember one simple rule." "What rule?" His expression went cold, all the artificial warmth draining away to reveal the predator beneath. "Never lie to me, never betray me, and never, ever forget that in my world, debts are always paid, one way or another." I nodded, not trusting my voice. He'd just offered me salvation and damnation in the same breath, wrapped in an employment contract I hadn't even seen yet. As I walked back toward the ballroom, I felt his eyes on me the entire way, watching, assessing, owning. I'd just sold my soul to the devil in a Brioni tuxedo. I just hoped the price wouldn't be higher than I could afford to pay. The next 3 weeks were a masterclass in controlled chaos. Dante Moretti wasn't just involved in planning his daughter's party. He was obsessively, meticulously, exhaustingly involved in every decision. From the shade of pink for the roses, blush not shell, and God forbid I confuse the two, to the security protocols for valet parking, each attendant would be background checked and equipped with panic buttons, nothing escaped his scrutiny. "The ice sculptures need to be moved 12 inches to the left," he said, during our 5th walkthrough of his estate's ballroom. "The current position creates a blind spot from the northeast entrance." I looked at the magnificent ice swans, each one a work of art that had cost $3,000. They looked perfect where they were. But I'd learned not to question Dante's security paranoia. The man thought like a military strategist, viewing every decorative choice through the lens of potential threats. "Of course, Mr. Moretti. I'll have the team adjust them." "Dante." He glanced at me, something unreadable in his dark eyes. "We've been working together for 3 weeks. I think we can dispense with formality." It felt dangerous to use his first name, like stepping across an invisible line that separated professional distance from something more intimate. But refusing would be equally dangerous, a rejection of the access he was granting me. "Dante, then." I made a note on my tablet. "Your daughter, Gianna, she's been very quiet during our meetings. Most 18-year-olds have strong opinions about their birthday parties." His expression softened in a way I'd never seen before. The ruthless criminal mastermind gave way to something gentler, more human. A father who loved his daughter with a fierce protectiveness that was almost painful to witness. "Gianna has spent her entire life learning to be invisible," he said quietly. "When you're my daughter, silence is safer than opinions. She's only beginning to understand that she can have preferences without endangering herself." The admission was so raw, so unexpected, that I stopped pretending to look at my notes and met his gaze directly. "What happened to her mother?" Most men would have shut down, retreated behind the walls of privacy that the powerful build around their vulnerabilities. But Dante held my gaze, and in his eyes I saw old grief, carefully managed but never fully healed. "She was killed when Gianna was 6. A message from a rival family, delivered in blood." His jaw tightened. I learned 2 things that day. First, that love is a weakness your enemies will exploit without mercy. Second, that I would burn down the entire world before I let anyone harm my daughter again. "Did you? Burn down the world?" A ghost of that sharp smile. "Let's just say the rival family no longer exists, and every organization in Chicago understands that Gianna Moretti is untouchable, not because of money or power, but because I demonstrated very clearly what happens to those who threaten what's mine." The possessiveness in his voice sent a shiver down my spine. This was a man who didn't make idle threats. He made promises written in blood and kept them with the methodical precision of a predator who never forgot an injury. "She's lucky to have you protecting her." "No." He turned to face me fully, and I was struck by how close we were standing. Close enough to feel the heat radiating from him, to see the slight scar above his left eyebrow, the silver threading through his dark hair at the temples. "She's unfortunate enough to need that level of protection. There's a difference." Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. Sophia with another crisis that needed immediate attention. The florist had delivered peonies instead of garden roses. The calligrapher had misspelled 3 names on the place cards, and the caterer was having a meltdown over the dietary restrictions list. "I need to go." He stepped back, re-establishing the professional distance we'd briefly abandoned. Fix whatever disaster is currently unfolding. That's what I pay you for. I nodded and hurried out, but I could feel his eyes following me, always watching, always calculating. What I didn't know then was that Dante Moretti had a gift for reading people, for seeing through the masks we wear and identifying the vulnerabilities we try to hide. And in those 3 weeks of working together, he'd been studying me just as carefully as he studied everyone else in his orbit. He'd seen something that intrigued him, something that made me different from the parade of sycophants and social climbers who populated his world. He'd seen that I wasn't afraid of him, not in the way everyone else was afraid. Yes, I was aware of his danger, his power, his capacity for violence. But I didn't flinch when he entered a room, didn't stammer or freeze or try too hard to please him. I treated him like a particularly demanding client, with professional courtesy and controlled frustration when his perfectionism bordered on obsessive. For a man who inspired fear in everyone he met, my lack of terror was fascinating. And fascination, in Dante Moretti's world, was far more dangerous than fear. The night before Gianna's birthday party, I was in the estate's kitchen going over final preparations with the catering team when Dante found me. We need to talk, privately. The catering staff immediately found reasons to be elsewhere, disappearing with the practiced efficiency of people who understood when their presence was unwanted. I set down my clipboard and followed him to his study, the same room where he'd first offered me this impossible job. "Is there a problem with tomorrow?" I asked, mentally reviewing every detail. Every vendor had been confirmed twice. Every security protocol had been checked and double-checked. Every contingency plan had a backup plan. "No, the party will be perfect because you're excellent at your job." He poured himself a drink from the crystal decanter on his desk. This time, he poured me one too. "This is about something else." I accepted the glass because refusing would have been an insult, but I didn't drink. "I'm listening." "There's a man coming tomorrow, Vittorio Calabresi. He's the head of the New York family, and his presence is obligatory." The way he said obligatory made it clear this wasn't a social invitation. "He's bringing his son, Marco, 23 years old, recently returned from business school, ambitious and stupid in the way young men with power tend to be." Okay. I waited for him to explain why I needed to know this. "Marco has a reputation. He thinks his family name gives him permission to take what he wants. Consequences be damned." Dante's voice went cold. "I'm telling you this because he will notice you. You're beautiful, intelligent, and you'll be moving through the party without the protection of a date or obvious affiliation. To someone like Marco, that makes you fair game." My cheeks warmed at the casual way he'd called me beautiful, as if it was simply an observable fact rather than a compliment. "I can handle unwanted attention." "Not from Marco Calabresi." He set down his glass with a sharp click. "I'm not asking you to hide or make yourself invisible. I'm telling you that if he approaches you, if he makes you uncomfortable in any way, you'll inform me immediately. Understood?" There was something almost possessive in his tone, something that went beyond employer protecting employee. It made my pulse quicken in a way that had nothing to do with fear. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you're under my protection now. Everyone at this party will understand that. Everyone except Marco, who's too arrogant to recognize danger until it's too late." He moved closer, and I forced myself not to step back. "And because I don't want there to be any misunderstandings about where your loyalties lie." "My loyalties? You work for me, Isabella. That means you're mine to protect, mine to defend." His hand came up, fingers tucking a loose strand of hair behind my ear with a gentleness that seemed impossible from a man who'd built an empire on violence. "And I protect what's mine with extreme prejudice." My breath caught in my throat. The touch had been brief, professional even, but it sent electricity racing across my skin. I should get back to the kitchen. Running away? Being professional? I met his eyes, refusing to show how much his proximity affected me. "You hired me to plan your daughter's party, not to play whatever game this is." "This isn't a game." His voice dropped lower, intimate and dangerous. "Games have rules, winners and losers, an end point. What's happening between us is something else entirely." "Nothing is happening between us, isn't it?" He smiled, and it was nothing like the cold expressions I'd seen him wear in public. This smile was genuine, almost boyish, transforming his severe features into something devastatingly attractive. You feel it too, every time we're in a room together. Every time I stand too close and you forget to breathe. Every time you challenge me instead of cowering, and I want to know what else that sharp mind of yours is capable of. Mr. Moretti, Dante. Dante. His name felt dangerous on my tongue. I can't. My mother, the debt you cleared, this job. There's too much at stake for me to what? To feel something? To want something for yourself instead of constantly sacrificing for everyone else? He cupped my face in his hand, thumb brushing across my cheekbone. I know your type, Isabella. You're a martyr, always putting everyone else first, wearing your self-sacrifice like armor. But martyrs make terrible survivors. And what am I supposed to be surviving? You? My world, the one you've stepped into by accepting this job. His expression grew serious. After tomorrow, there's no going back. Everyone who matters will know your face, know you're associated with me. That's dangerous, Isabella. More dangerous than you understand. Once you're in my orbit, you're marked. Protected, but marked. Then why offer me the job? Because I'm a selfish man who wanted an excuse to have you near me. The admission was delivered without shame or hesitation. And because I think you're stronger than you know, strong enough to survive what comes next. What comes next? Instead of answering, he leaned in slowly, giving me time to pull away, to protest, to run. I did none of those things. I stood frozen as his lips brushed mine, soft and questioning. Nothing like the commanding force I'd expected. The kiss was gentle, almost reverent, and it terrified me more than any threat he could have made. Because gentleness from a man like Dante Moretti was the most dangerous thing of all. It made you forget what he was capable of. Made you believe you could be the exception to his ruthlessness. Made you want things you had no right to want. When he pulled back, his dark eyes were stormy with barely controlled restraint. Tomorrow, you'll stand at my side during the party. Not as an employee, but as my guest. People will see us together, draw conclusions, make assumptions. That's not what we agreed to. I'm changing the terms. He stepped back, releasing me from the spell of his proximity. You can refuse, of course. I'll still pay you what was promised. Your mother's debt will remain cleared, but I think you won't refuse. Why not? Because you're curious. Because you felt it too, that kiss. Because some part of you has been sleepwalking through life, and you're finally beginning to wake up. He moved to the door, opened it. Get some rest, Isabella. Tomorrow will change everything. I walked past him on unsteady legs, but paused at the threshold. You said Marco Calabresi is stupid and ambitious. What does that make you? His laugh was low and dark. Dangerous and obsessed. Which is infinitely worse. I fled to my car, heart racing, lips still tingling from his kiss. I should have driven away and never looked back. Should have recognized the trap he'd laid and walked away from the bait. But Dante had been right about one thing. I was curious, and curiosity had killed far more than just cats. Gianna Moretti's 18th birthday party was a glittering success from the moment the first guests arrived. The estate's ballroom had been transformed into something out of a fairy tale. Thousands of white roses cascaded from crystal chandeliers. Gold-rimmed china caught the light from hundreds of candles. A string orchestra played classical music that somehow managed to be elegant without being stuffy. And at the center of it all was Gianna herself, radiant in a silver gown that made her look like moonlight personified. She was beautiful in the way her father was handsome. Sharp features softened by youth, dark eyes that missed nothing, a quiet grace that came from learning to move through a dangerous world without drawing attention. But tonight, she was allowed to be the star, and she wore it with surprising confidence. You did this, Dante said beside me, his hand resting possessively on the small of my back. Gave her a night where she can be just a girl, not the daughter of Dante Moretti. I'd arrived 2 hours early to oversee final preparations, wearing the dress Dante had sent to my apartment. Midnight blue silk that clung to curves I usually kept hidden under professional blazers and pencil skirts. Diamond earrings that had probably cost more than my car and came with a card that read simply, "Wear these? D." The possessive gesture should have annoyed me. Instead, it sent a thrill through my body that I refused to examine too closely. She's a lovely girl, I said, watching Gianna laugh at something one of her friends whispered. You've raised her well. I've kept her alive and relatively undamaged. That's not the same as raising her well. His thumb traced small circles against my spine, a casual touch that felt anything but casual. But tonight, thanks to you, she gets to pretend she's normal. That's a gift I could never give her on my own. Before I could respond, a ripple went through the crowd. Conversations paused mid-sentence. Smiles became fixed. Even the string quartet seemed to play more quietly. Vittorio Calabrese had arrived. He was a barrel-chested man in his 60s with iron gray hair and the kind of face that suggested he'd been handsome once, before power and cruelty had carved new lines into his features. His suit was expensive but slightly outdated, as if he'd stopped caring about fashion trends around 1995 and decided whatever had worked then was good enough forever. But it was the young man beside him who drew my attention. Marco Calabrese was everything his father wasn't: sleek, modern, handsome, in the way of men who've never been told no. His dark hair was styled with careful casualness, his suit tailored to emphasize his athletic build, and his smile held the kind of confidence that came from a lifetime of privilege. His eyes swept the room, cataloging and dismissing the guests with barely concealed boredom, until they landed on me. And stopped. The hunger in his gaze made my skin crawl. "Dante!" Vittorio's voice boomed across the ballroom, arms spreading in an exaggerated gesture of friendship that fooled no one. "What a magnificent party! You honor us all with your hospitality." "Vittorio." Dante's hand tightened almost imperceptibly on my back. "Your presence honors my daughter. Please enjoy the evening." The two men exchanged the kind of embrace that was more threat assessment than greeting, all false smiles and calculating eyes. I felt like I was watching two predators circle each other, each looking for signs of weakness, neither willing to show any. "And who is this vision?" Vittorio turned his attention to me, his smile revealing teeth stained from years of espresso and cigars. "Dante, you didn't mention you were seeing anyone." "Isabella HEAs," Dante said smoothly. "She planned this evening and has graciously agreed to be my guest." The words were carefully chosen. Not girlfriend, not date, but not employee either. An ambiguous middle ground that claimed me without fully defining the claim. "Ah, Miss HEAs, my son mentioned wanting to meet the woman responsible for such exquisite taste." Vittorio gestured, and Marco materialized at his elbow like a predator scenting prey. "Marco, come greet our host and his beautiful companion." Marco's smile widened as he took my hand, bringing it to his lips in a gesture that would have been charming if his eyes hadn't been mentally undressing me. "Enchanted, Miss HEAs. Perhaps later you could show me around. I'd love to hear about your vision for the evening." "Miss HEAs will be occupied with her hosting duties," Dante said, his voice pleasant but with an edge that made several nearby guests find reasons to move away. "I'm sure you understand." Of course. Marco released my hand slowly, his thumb brushing across my knuckles in a touch that felt deliberately provocative. "Though I hope we'll have time to talk later, I'm always interested in talented women." The emphasis on talented made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. This wasn't harmless flirting. It was a challenge, deliberately issued in front of Dante to gauge his reaction. "Enjoy the party," I said evenly, extracting my hand from Marco's grip. "If you'll excuse me, I need to check on the kitchen staff." I didn't wait for permission, just moved away with practiced grace, feeling 3 different sets of eyes tracking my movement. Dante's, dark and possessive. Marco's, hungry and entitled. And Vittorio's, calculating what my presence meant and how it could be exploited. The next 2 hours were a blur of coordinating staff, managing crises, and avoiding Marco Calabrese. He seemed to materialize wherever I went, always with an excuse to speak with me, to touch my arm, to stand too close and breathe in my space. "The ice sculptures are beautiful," he said, cornering me near the bar. "Almost as beautiful as the woman who arranged them." "Thank you. If you'll excuse me, Dante seems very protective of you." His smile sharpened. "I'm curious why. Are you lovers, or just another business transaction dressed up in silk and diamonds?" The insult stung, perhaps because there was a kernel of truth in it. What was I to Dante? An employee he'd kissed once and claimed without permission? A woman who'd sold her soul for her mother's medical bills? My relationship with Mr. Moretti is none of your concern. Everything in this city is my concern. He moved closer and I smelled cologne that was too heavy, too cloying. New York is expanding our operations. My father is old, cautious. But me? I see opportunities everywhere, including in a beautiful woman who's clearly wasted on a man old enough to be her father. Dante is barely 40. And you're what? 26? 27? Young enough to want things he can't give you. Excitement. Passion. A man who isn't weighted down by dead wives and traumatized daughters? Before I could respond, a hand closed around Marco's wrist. Not violently, but with enough pressure to make the younger man's eyes widen. Marco. Dante's voice was glacier cold. I believe Isabella indicated she wasn't interested in conversation. In my home, we respect such boundaries. We were just talking. Marco tried to pull his hand back, but Dante's grip didn't loosen. Surely you're not so insecure that you can't allow your guest to speak with other men? I'm secure enough to recognize when someone is being deliberately disrespectful to a woman under my protection. Dante released Marco's wrist with deliberate care. And wise enough to end such disrespect before it escalates into something we'll both regret. The two men stared at each other, and I felt the weight of every eye in the ballroom turning toward us. The music continued playing, but conversations had died. Everyone was watching to see if this would explode into something more than a social disagreement. Gentlemen, I stepped between them, smile fixed firmly in place despite my racing heart. It's Gianna's birthday. Perhaps we could save the territorial displays for another time? Marco laughed, but it was brittle with wounded pride. Of course. My apologies if I offended. I was merely appreciating Dante's excellent taste in companions. He walked away, spine stiff with barely contained anger. I could see his father across the room, watching with an expression that suggested this scene had been exactly what he wanted. A public demonstration of the tension between our families, played out over possession of a woman who'd never agreed to be anyone's territory. Are you all right? Dante's hand was gentle on my shoulder, at odds with the violence I could sense thrumming beneath his controlled exterior. I'm fine, but that was necessary. His eyes were still fixed on Marco's retreating form. He needed to understand that you're not available, that touching you, speaking to you that way, carries consequences. I'm not yours to defend. Yes, you are. He finally looked at me, and the intensity in his gaze stole my breath. The moment you walked into my world, you became mine. Mine to protect, mine to defend, mine to claim. And I don't share. Before I could process that declaration, Sophia appeared at my elbow with an iPad and a panicked expression. Bella, we have a situation with the caterers. Something about the dessert display. I followed her toward the kitchen, but I could feel Dante's eyes on me the entire way. When I glanced back, he was standing exactly where I'd left him, surrounded by fawning guests but paying them no attention. He was watching me like a hawk watches prey. And God help me, I liked it. An hour later, the party had reached that perfect peak where everyone was pleasantly drunk, but not sloppy, full but not uncomfortable, entertained but not exhausted. Gianna had opened her presents to appropriate oohs and ahs, the cake had been cut and served, and I was finally allowing myself to believe we'd pulled it off without major disaster. That's when Vittorio Calabrese decided to make a toast. He stood at the center of the ballroom, champagne glass raised, his booming voice cutting through the gentle hum of conversation. Friends, familia, honored guests. I've been coming to Chicago for 30 years, and I can honestly say I've never seen a party quite like this one. Polite applause. Dante stood near the orchestra, face carefully neutral, but I could read the tension in his shoulders. Dante Moretti has always known how to put on a show, Vittorio continued. Whether it's a birthday party or a business negotiation, the man has flair, though I remember a time when his idea of entertainment was a bit more direct. A murmur went through the crowd. This wasn't the friendly ribbing of old friends. This was Vittorio reminding everyone in the room that beneath the tuxedos and champagne, these were men who solved problems with violence. Ah, but we're civilized now, aren't we? Vittorio laughed, and several people joined him uncertainly. Old grudges are forgotten. Past disagreements are water under the bridge. We're all friends here, celebrating this beautiful girl's entrance into adulthood. Though I have to say, Dante, you've done a remarkable job keeping Gianna sheltered. Most daughters of men in our position learn early what their fathers really do for a living, but Gianna still has that innocent shine, that naive belief that her father is just a businessman. How long do you think that will last? The room went deadly quiet. Vittorio had just crossed an invisible line. You could insult a man's honor, question his power, even threaten his life, but you didn't ever bring his children into it. Not like this. Not with the clear implication that Gianna's innocence was temporary, that eventually she'd learn the truth about the blood her comfortable life was built on. Dante's face was stone, but his hand had curled into a fist at his side. Around the room, his men had shifted position, moving closer to the Calabrese delegation. The air thrummed with the potential for violence. Though, to be fair, Vittorio continued, oblivious or deliberately ignoring the danger. Maybe it runs in the family. Dante himself was 18 when his father died. Wasn't that what forced you to grow up so fast? I remember you as a boy. Soft. Weak. Nothing like the man you became. Funny how tragedy shapes us, isn't it? He was talking about the night Dante's parents were killed. The trauma that had forged a teenager into the man who now ran Chicago's underworld. And he was doing it at that same man's daughter's birthday party in front of the entire city's elite. It was a declaration of war, wrapped in champagne and false bonhomie. Dante moved toward Vittorio with deliberate calm, and every person in that room held their breath. This was it. The moment where the careful fiction of civilization would shatter, and we'd all see the monster underneath. But instead of violence, Dante smiled. "You're absolutely right, Vittorio," he said smoothly. "Tragedy does shape us. For example, I heard your grandson recently recovered from that unfortunate kidnapping. What a terrible ordeal for everyone involved. Thankfully, you paid the ransom quickly, and he was returned relatively unharmed. Such a relief that your family was willing to negotiate instead of doing something rash. The message was clear. You mention my daughter, I mention your grandson. You want to compare tragedies? We can do that all night. But consider carefully if you want to go down that road." Vittorio's face flushed red. The kidnapping had been a humiliation, a demonstration that even the head of the New York family wasn't untouchable. And Dante had just reminded everyone in the room about it, couched in language so polite it couldn't quite be called an insult. "At least my grandson is learning the business properly," Vittorio shot back, "not being kept in ignorance like some delicate flower. Marco understands what it takes to survive in our world, how to recognize opportunities, how to take what he wants instead of waiting for permission." Another pointed glance in my direction. The implication was clear. Marco wanted me, and he wasn't going to let Dante's territorial display stop him. "The problem with taking what you want," Dante said quietly, "is that sometimes what you want belongs to someone with a much longer memory and far fewer scruples about revenge." Is that a threat? It's an observation. Dante's smile never wavered. For example, I want peace between our families. I want to celebrate my daughter's birthday without measuring the distance to the nearest exit. I want to believe that when I invite you into my home, you'll respect my hospitality instead of using it as an opportunity to issue challenges and innuendo. And what do you plan to do if your wants aren't respected? The room was holding its collective breath. One wrong word, one gesture, and this would explode into bloodshed. I could see Dante's men positioning themselves, could see the Calabrese guards doing the same. Then Dante laughed. It wasn't a polite chuckle or a forced social noise. It was a genuine, almost delighted laugh, as if Vittorio had just told the funniest joke he'd heard all year. I'll do what I always do, Vittorio. I'll adapt. I'll adjust. I'll find creative solutions to unexpected problems. His eyes were warm, his smile wide, and every instinct I had was screaming that this was the most dangerous version of Dante Moretti I'd ever seen. After all, it's not like I'd do anything crazy, like, say, release the SEC investigation documents that prove your shipping business is laundering money for 3 different cartels, or leak the photos of Marco's visits to that underground club where they traffic minors, or maybe tip off the FBI about the offshore accounts your accountant thinks are hidden so cleverly. He paused, letting the words sink in. But I'd never do any of that. Because we're friends, aren't we, Vittorio? Friends who respect each other's boundaries and children and homes. Friends who understand that peace is preferable to the alternative. Friends who would never, ever mistake hospitality for weakness. The temperature in the room had dropped 20 degrees. Dante had just detailed exactly how he could destroy the Calabrese family, legally and permanently, all while smiling like he was discussing the weather. "So let's raise our glasses," Dante continued, lifting his champagne. "To friendship, to respect, to understanding that some lines should never be crossed. Salute!" "Salut!" the room echoed weakly. Vittorio stared at Dante for a long moment, face purple with rage and humiliation. Then he forced a smile that looked more like a grimace, raised his glass, and drank. The moment broke. Conversations resumed, people moved. The string quartet started a new piece, but I could feel the aftermath, like the ringing in your ears after a gunshot. Dante had just threatened to bring down the entire New York organization, and he'd done it so smoothly that it couldn't quite be called a threat. Just a reminder of what he was capable of, delivered with perfect politeness. It was terrifying. It was brilliant. And God help me, I laughed. Not loudly, not dramatically, but that genuine bubble of surprised amusement that comes when you see something so audacious, so perfectly executed, that you can't help but appreciate the artistry of it. 47 people heard me laugh at Dante Moretti's veiled threat to destroy the Calabrese family. 47 people who'd been silent, faces frozen in expressions of appropriate seriousness. And I'd laughed like it was the funniest thing I'd ever heard. The room went silent again, but this time all eyes were on me. Marco Calabrese stared at me with open shock. Vittorio's face went from purple to nearly crimson. Even Dante's men looked uncertain, as if I'd just broken some unspoken rule of engagement. And Dante himself turned to look at me, dark eyes wide with surprise. Then his mouth curved into a smile. Not the cold, predatory one he wore like armor. A real smile, warm and genuine, and so unexpected it transformed his entire face. "Isabella finds my sense of humor refreshing," he said to the room at large. "I always knew she was a woman of exceptional taste." His hand found mine, fingers interlacing with a possessiveness that made my heart stammer. He raised our joined hands slightly, a gesture that declared ownership to everyone watching. "Now," he continued, voice carrying authority that no one would dare challenge, "I believe we were celebrating my daughter. Gianna, darling, would you do us the honor of a dance?" The moment broke. The party resumed, but I could feel eyes on me for the rest of the evening. Curious, calculating, assessing what it meant that I'd laughed when everyone else had frozen. Marco Calabrese stared at me with something between fury and fascination. Vittorio watched me like a chess player studying an unexpected move. And Dante's men had subtly shifted their positions, no longer just protecting their boss, but extending that protection to include me. In one thoughtless moment of genuine amusement, I'd done what months of careful positioning couldn't accomplish. I'd shown I wasn't afraid of Dante Moretti. And in his world, that made me either incredibly stupid or incredibly valuable. The only question was which. The party wound down with excruciating slowness. Guests departed in careful order, the most important leaving first, the lesser players waiting their turn like courtiers dismissed from a royal audience. The Calabrese delegation was among the last to go. Vittorio's forced smile never reaching his eyes, Marco shooting me looks that promised this wasn't over. "An interesting evening," Vittorio said as he shook Dante's hand with ritualistic precision. "We'll have to continue our discussion of business opportunities in the near future." "I look forward to it." Dante's voice held all the warmth of a glacier. "Give my regards to your wife." After they left, the cleanup crew moved through the ballroom with practiced efficiency, dismantling the fairy tale I'd built. I supervised, checking my tablet against the itemized list, making sure every crystal glass and gold-rimmed plate was accounted for. "Leave it." I turned to find Dante leaning against the door frame, jacket discarded, bow tie undone, the top button of his shirt open. He looked exhausted and dangerous, a predator after a successful hunt. "I need to make sure everything is—" I said, "Leave it." He pushed off the wall, moved toward me with that controlled grace that was somehow more threatening than any aggressive posture. "The staff will handle it. You and I need to talk." My heart hammered against my ribs, but I set down my tablet with forced calm. "About what?" "About the fact that you just made yourself a target in a war you don't understand." He was close now, close enough that I had to tilt my head back to meet his eyes. "About the fact that Marco Calabrese is now obsessed with having you, if only to prove he can take something from me. About the fact that you laughed when you should have been terrified." "I'm sorry," I said. though I wasn't sure what I was apologizing for. I didn't mean to. Don't. His hand cupped my face, thumb brushing across my lips with devastating gentleness. Don't apologize for being the most interesting thing to happen to me in 20 years. Don't apologize for seeing the humor in a situation everyone else found terrifying. Don't apologize for being exactly who you are. Who am I? Brave, brilliant, completely unpredictable. His forehead dropped to rest against mine, the gesture so intimate it stole my breath. And utterly, completely mine. Dante, I know. It's too fast, too intense, too dangerous. I know all the reasons you should run. The smart thing would be to disappear. Change your name, move to another city, rebuild your life somewhere I can't reach you. His hand slid into my hair, tilting my head to force me to meet his eyes. But you're not going to do that, are you? No, I whispered, the admission falling from my lips before I could stop it. I'm not. Why not? Because I'd spent 26 years playing it safe, being responsible, putting everyone else's needs before my own. And in 3 weeks of working with Dante Moretti, I'd felt more alive than in all the years before combined. Because when he looked at me, I wasn't just Isabella Hayes, struggling event planner with a mountain of debt and a life full of compromises. I was someone worth protecting, worth claiming, worth going to war over. Because some treacherous part of me wanted to see where this would lead, even knowing it might destroy me. Because I'm curious, I finally said. And because you were right. I've been sleepwalking through life. But I'm awake now. His kiss was nothing like the gentle brush of lips from the night before. This was claiming, possessive, desperate in a way that should have frightened me. His hands fisted in my hair, his body pressed against mine with urgent need, and I kissed him back with equal hunger, all pretense of professionalism burning away like mist in sunlight. When he finally pulled back, we were both breathing hard, my lipstick smeared across his mouth, his carefully styled hair disheveled from my fingers. Come home with me, he said, voice rough. Not to my office or the ballroom. My actual home. Let me show you who I am when the mask comes off. It was an invitation to cross the final line, to step from business association into something personal, intimate, irrevocable. Okay, I heard myself say. His smile was fierce with triumph. My car's waiting. Dante's private residence was in a different wing of the estate, accessed through a maze of corridors that twisted and turned with deliberate confusion. Security measures, he explained, making it harder for intruders to navigate even if they breached the outer defenses. But when he finally opened the door to his personal space, it wasn't the fortress I'd expected. The apartment was warm, lived in, human. Books overflowed from floor-to-ceiling shelves. A worn leather armchair sat by the fireplace, a reading lamp positioned at just the right angle. Framed photos lined the mantel. Gianna at various ages, Dante with his parents before their death. Candid shots that captured joy and loss and love. This is where I come when I need to remember I'm human, he said quietly, watching me take it all in. Not the ghost of Chicago or the head of the Moretti family. Just Dante, father, son, man. I moved to the mantel, studying a photo of Dante as a teenager with his parents. He was smiling, genuinely happy, before tragedy had carved away that softness and replaced it with steel. How old were you when they died? 17, old enough to inherit the family business, young enough to still believe in justice and fairness. He poured 2 glasses of wine, handed me one. I learned better quickly. What happened? He was quiet for a long moment, staring into his glass like it held answers to questions he'd stopped asking years ago. My father was trying to broker peace between 3 rival families. He thought if he could bring everyone together, show them that cooperation was more profitable than war, we could build something lasting, something better than the constant violence. But they killed him for it. They killed both my parents during a supposedly neutral meeting. A bomb in the restaurant detonated during dessert. His voice was eerily calm, detached in the way of someone who'd told this story so many times it no longer felt personal. 18 people died. My father, my mother, 2 of the rival bosses, their wives, security personnel. Just gone in an instant because someone decided peace was less valuable than proving a point. I'm sorry. Everyone is sorry. He finally looked at me. But sorry doesn't bring them back. Sorry doesn't change the fact that I inherited an empire at 17 with rivals circling like sharks, all of them thinking I was too young, too soft, too much like my idealistic father to survive. But you did survive. I did more than survive. I took every family that had been part of that bombing and destroyed them systematically, methodically, personally. It took me 3 years, but by the time I was 20, those organizations no longer existed. Not absorbed or taken over, erased. Every member dead or scattered, their businesses dismantled, their legacies turned to ash. He said it without pride or shame, just factual recounting of actions taken. But I could see the cost in his eyes, the price paid for that revenge. And after? After everyone else fell in line, the message was clear. Dante Moretti doesn't negotiate, doesn't compromise, doesn't forgive. Cross me or mine and you don't just lose, you cease to exist. He set down his glass. It's kept the peace for 20 years, a peace built on fear, but peace nonetheless. Is that what you want? For people to fear you? I want my daughter safe. I want to sleep at night without wondering if tonight's the night an enemy finally gets lucky. I want to build something that will last beyond my death, so when I'm gone, Gianna has security instead of just money. He moved closer, his hand finding mine. And apparently I want you, which is the most selfish, reckless thing I've wanted in 2 decades. Why reckless? Because caring about someone makes you vulnerable, gives your enemies a target. My wife died because someone wanted to hurt me, wanted to prove I could be touched. For years after, I avoided attachments that could be exploited. Even Gianna was kept at arm's length emotionally until I was sure I could protect her physically. But watching you tonight, seeing you laugh when everyone else froze, I realized I was already too far gone to protect myself. His thumb traced circles on the back of my hand. You've become a weakness, Isabella. One I'm not willing to give up, even knowing what it might cost. That's not fair to me. I know, which is why I'm giving you one last chance to walk away. He released my hand, stepped back to create physical distance, even as his eyes held mine with magnetic intensity. Leave now, tonight, and I'll make sure you're protected from the fallout of the Calabrese situation. New identity, new city, enough money to start over. You'll be safe, and I'll be miserable, but you'll be out of danger. Or stay, become part of my world in every way that matters. Accept my protection, my claim, all the complications that come with being mine. Risk the danger for the reward. Choose me, knowing exactly what that choice means. I should have taken the out. Should have recognized this for the trap it was. The point of no return he was laying out with brutal honesty. But as I stood in his personal sanctuary, surrounded by the evidence of his humanity beneath the monster, I realized I'd already made my choice. Maybe as early as that first kiss in his study. Maybe even earlier, in the moment he'd looked at me and seen someone worth protecting instead of just using. I'm staying, I said, the tension drained from his shoulders, replaced by something raw and relieved and almost vulnerable. Thank God. He crossed the distance between us in 2 strides, hands framing my face as he kissed me with a hunger that spoke of restraint finally breaking. I kissed him back with equal desperation, fingers fumbling with the buttons of his shirt, needing to feel skin, heat, proof that this dangerous man was real and warm and mine. We made it as far as the couch before clothing became more impediment than decoration. His hands were everywhere, learning the shape of me with thorough attention that should have been intimidating, but was only intoxicating. When he finally slid inside me, his eyes locked on mine with an intensity that saw through every defense I'd ever built. Mine, he growled against my throat. Say it. Yours, I gasped, the word feeling like surrender and victory all at once. Afterwards, we lay tangled together on the couch, my head on his chest, his fingers trailing idle patterns on my spine. The fire crackled quietly, casting dancing shadows on the walls. What happens now? I asked. Now, you move into the estate. We make our relationship public and official. You become a known target, which means you get full security detail and probably hate losing your privacy. He pressed a kiss to my hair. And you continue planning events because you're brilliant at it, and I will not let your career suffer for my possessiveness. That simple? Nothing about this will be simple. Marco Calabrese won't forget tonight. His pride is wounded, and he'll see taking you from me as the ultimate revenge. We'll need to be careful, vigilant, and prepared for him to make a move. And the legitimate business world? How do we explain our relationship to them? We don't. Let them draw their own conclusions. The truth is complicated enough without worrying about appearances. He shifted to look down at me, expression serious. But Isabella, you need to understand something. Once you're publicly linked to me, there's no going back to your old life. Your friends may distance themselves. Your business may suffer. People will make assumptions, most of them unflattering. Are you prepared for that? I thought about my small apartment, my struggling business, the endless cycle of debt and obligation that had defined my existence. Thought about the freedom of being seen, claimed, protected by a man who commanded respect and fear in equal measure. I'm prepared, I said. His smile was slow and satisfied. Good, because I have plans for you, Isabella Hayes. For us, and they start with making sure everyone in this city understands exactly what you mean to me. The headline in the Tribune's Society section read, "Mystery Woman Captures Chicago's Most Eligible Bachelor." I stared at the photo of Dante and me at the opera, his hand possessively on my waist. Both of us caught mid-laugh at something he'd whispered. We looked happy, in love even, though neither of us had said those particular words yet. "You're reading it again," Dante said, emerging from his study with a stack of papers. "Wasn't once enough? I'm still getting used to being public." I set down the newspaper. 3 months ago, I was invisible. Now, I'm the subject of speculation in every gossip column in the city. Regrets? I considered the question seriously. Living with Dante meant sacrifices. My business had indeed suffered when several high-profile clients decided they did not want to be associated with Dante Moretti's woman. I'd lost friends who couldn't reconcile the Isabella they knew with the woman dating a known criminal. My mother had needed extensive convincing that I wasn't in danger. But I'd also gained security I'd never known. The freedom to pursue projects that interested me rather than just paid bills. A relationship that challenged and fulfilled me in equal measure. And a man who looked at me like I was the most important person in his world. "No regrets," I said. "Good, because I have something for you." He handed me a slim leather folder. Inside were architectural plans for a building in River North. Prime real estate, multiple floors, perfect for offices. "What is this?" "Your new headquarters. Deeded entirely in your name. No connection to me legally. Space for a full staff. Room to grow the business you've been dreaming about." He watched my face carefully. "I know you've lost clients because of our relationship. This is my way of making sure you can build something new. Something that's entirely yours." Tears pricked my eyes. In 3 months, Dante had learned me better than people I'd known my whole life. Known that I'd chafe at being just Dante Moretti's girlfriend, that I needed purpose and independence even within our relationship. It's too much. It's barely enough. He pulled me to my feet, arms wrapping around me with possessive certainty. "You've given up a lot to be with me. The least I can do is make sure you have the resources to build something extraordinary. I love you," I said, the words slipping out for the first time. His expression softened into something almost boyish. "Finally. I've been waiting 3 months to hear you say that." "You knew." "I've known since the night you laughed at my threat to destroy the Calabrese family. No one else would have found that funny. No one else would have seen the humor in my brand of darkness." He kissed me softly. "I love you too, Isabella. More than is probably wise or safe or sane. But I'm a selfish man, and I'm keeping you anyway. Promise?" "I promise, and I always keep my promises. The ones I make in business, and especially the ones I make to you." Below us, Chicago spread out in glittering splendor, a city we'd claimed together in our own complicated way. There would be challenges ahead. Marco Calabrese was still out there, nursing his wounded pride. Other enemies would emerge, seeking to exploit the weakness I represented. But standing in Dante's arms, looking out at a future I couldn't have imagined 6 months ago, I wasn't afraid. I'd laughed at the Mafia boss's joke, and in doing so, I'd found something I never knew I was searching for. Love, danger, and the strange freedom that comes from embracing both. Thank you so much for joining me for this story. If you enjoyed She Laughed at the Mafia boss's joke, Everyone Else Went Silent, Please don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to my channel for more thrilling Mafia romance tales. Your comments mean the world to me. Let me know what you thought and what kind of stories you'd like to see next. Should we visit Isabella and Dante again? What about Marco Calabrese's revenge plot? Until next time, keep reading and stay mysterious. Remember, sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is show you're not afraid. And sometimes, that's exactly what leads you to where you're meant to be. Ciao, darlings.